A few years ago, I decided I wanted to teach my kids about American history, and that is when I learned the term Charters of Freedom. And that is the collective name for the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. In learning about these founding documents, I wanted to understand more about the people, find out why they did what they did, why they wrote what they wrote. And what I really wanted to know is what gave these inexperienced colonists the courage to stand against the greatest military power on earth. What was it they were fighting for, really? Why were they willing to give their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for this cause? I created 3 workbooks, and today I want to show you what is inside each of them. This is Declaration of Independence Workbook number 1. It guides students through what the words actually say, and the goal is to help them gain a better understanding of what the issues really were that the colonists dealt with. This can be used with middle grades to adult. My youngest was 11 when we did this, and he did fine. He doodled all over his pages, but he was able to follow along and also discuss things with us. And my other 2 were 13 and 15. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lee Resolution, but on June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee, the delegate from Virginia, officially proposed that they vote to declare independence. So Workbook 1 starts with a brief historical background that includes the text of the Lee Resolution, which is what the delegates actually voted on when deciding for or against independence. You'll notice on this page and throughout the workbook, there's a place to define words that are unfamiliar or that students don't fully understand. The meanings of some words have changed since 1776. Some have changed a little, some have changed a lot. And one resource I found that I love is the Webster's Dictionary from 1828. It's a really fat book, and you can order it on Amazon or wherever you want. It's also available online for free, and you can get it on your phone as an app. It's a really handy resource. And since this text can be a little bit challenging, in each workbook I broke the words down into bite-sized sections. Then with my own kids, what I would do is we'd read what they wrote, then each of us would rewrite it in our own words, and then we would talk about our understanding of it. So for example, with this introduction, when in the course of human events, here are a few examples. My 15-year-old wrote, "We need to separate in order to respect each other." My 11-year-old said, "You gotta do what you gotta do." Or, when you have to break a political tether, you should notify the other tethered of the cause. So he understood it on his 11-year-old level. This is what a typical page spread looks like. I have the text broken into smaller pieces. For Workbook 1, I included words for them to define and then space for them to rewrite just that little part in their own words. And every once in a while, I'll ask a few questions to make them dig deeper. For example, do you feel that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are rights that should be available to everyone? Why or why not? And at this point, you may actually want to discuss different countries in the world that may or may not give their citizens the same rights as those in the United States. And just use that as a starting point for a discussion. That's where the learning really happens. Another question, which 3 grievances do you think would have felt the most wrong or unfair or made you the angriest if they happened to you or your family or someone in your community? And then explain your answer. It's the explaining that matters, because then they have to dig in and figure out their own why. And I found it works best if you give students time on their own to read through the questions, write their own answers before you discuss together. And as I studied these documents, I recognized that these were very imperfect human beings. They made mistakes, and they were in very stressful situations. So the fact that this document was ever made is truly miraculous. And the grievances were a little tricky at first, because sometimes I really didn't have any idea what, I don't remember studying this at all. Sometimes we didn't really know what they were saying, so we looked up the words, we looked online, we asked AI, we talked about it until we all figured out, okay, what is it that they are really saying? And we would usually cover about 3 or 4 of them each time we discussed. We worked through all 27 grievances, and before I studied the grievances, I really had no idea what sort of challenges the colonists were facing, and it really opened my eyes. And then after we were done, I asked my kids, I said, okay, what's something interesting that stands out to you about what we learned? And my daughter said essentially, oh, so they weren't just whining about little trivial inconveniences. This is actually real serious stuff. And I thought, yeah, you do understand. That's awesome. Workbook 1 ends with a list of the signers and the different printings of the Declaration of Independence and a little about when the Revolutionary War ended. And one thing that I learned that was fascinating to me is that famous signed copy that we are all very familiar with never made it to the king. That was actually an archival copy for their records only, and they did not send that to anyone. So it's just, that surprised me. Anyway, there's a little bit of tidbits about each of the different printings. Workbook 2 is about the why. This digs deeper and is probably for kids who are a little bit older, but I mean, you're the teacher, every child is different, you be the judge there. There's a lot more discussion involved in this. It also starts out with the Lee resolution, because that really is kind of the trigger where they said, we are going to declare independence. And then it includes a little bit more information than Workbook 1. Again, the text is broken down into little sections, and on each page there's plenty of space to write down and define unfamiliar words if you need to. But the difference lies in the questions. So below each section of text, there's questions that should make the students think. So for example, on this, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Do you agree with the self-evident truths listed in the preamble? Why or why not? Or what do the colonists feel that people have a right to do if their government is not fulfilling its purpose? Or do you agree with the colonists? Why or why not? Do you think they should have declared independence? And some of these are not easy questions, and if you only get through a couple, that's perfectly fine. But the goal is to get them to dig in and think. So I was having my husband read through my questions, and he said, well, I want to know what the context is behind the grievances. And I thought, I have no idea, actually. I was just learning the grievances. So I dug in and researched the grievances and put together a web page, which is the littleop.com/grievances at the bottom, or the QR code, either one works. The website has just the background, a basic background of all the different grievances. It's only included in Workbook 2 because it's more discussion based, but if you use Workbook 1, you're welcome to scan the QR code as well. The one thing that I thought was interesting is Thomas Jefferson did write about slavery in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, but it was moved because it would have split the nation before it even began. And so I included his words just because there's usually questions about it, and that way it gives you at least something to discuss. All 27 grievances are covered with a similar format to what is shown on this slide. So I want to pause for just a second and explain something. The reason I have two different workbooks is because this particular workbook, I made it to try and help students be more aware of the struggles the colonists were facing, but kind of on a personal level. So the colonists were British subjects. They were loyal, at least in the beginning, to the crown, and they were trying to do their best to be law-abiding citizens. So these questions focus on their difficult situations and how their hands were tied in a lot of ways, and how sometimes they had to either give in to what the king asked or to fight back. So my goal was to help students really wrestle with these questions and try and figure out how else would you have done it. And sometimes you realize the only viable option, if they really wanted things to change, was to rebel against the system because they didn't agree with it. This workbook also ends with the list of the signers and about the different printings. But one thing I added that I thought was interesting is the king's response to the colonists. And it's actually interesting to see things from his perspective. We have the United States Constitution Workbook. This is the law of the land, at least of the United States. So this workbook includes a little background about the Articles of Confederation, which I threw in the appendix as well, just so you can look at them if you want, and how they were not really working, and how it led to the need for a new form of government. This workbook also has the complete text of the Constitution, and things that are underlined have been added since the original, and then I have footnotes at the bottom to go with them to give you the explanation as to why. There's also a lot of space for writing down your own thoughts, questions, insight. On some of the pages I've included questions like, who's your senator, who's your governor, who's your mayor, who's the Speaker of the House, and I would recommend going through a couple pages at a time, depending on the time you have, your students' attention span. If they're older students, they are welcome to do this on their own. You can assign them, here, go learn and come back and share with me what you've learned. So I included the dates that each state ratified the Constitution, and I also wanted to add a little bit about the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, what they were and the part they played. And I don't know if most people realize that the majority of the population sided with the Anti-Federalists. But we hear about the Federalists because they were better represented among the national leaders. So this kind of gives you a little bit more information, and hopefully it'll interest you enough to dig deeper if you want, or your students can. It's very interesting. So this workbook also has the Bill of Rights and all 27 amendments. And one thing I added was a little page to show how the amendments are passed, because I realized I had no idea. For each amendment, I have included the year it was ratified, and right here on that red line, and plenty of space for you to take notes, study more in depth, or whatever it is you choose to do with this document. And this is where you can find me. If you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram, just scan the QR code. Thank you. Enjoy.